5 tips for recording great directing guitars. Tip number 1, make sure you turn the input gain all the way down on your interface. This will allow for better clarity in your sound and give you more options down the road for tone sculpting, since the signal won't be too high going in and there won't be any unwanted distortion on the raw tracks. Plus, this will also ensure that every time you go to record guitars, your signal and tone presets will sound the same, just as long as you are using the same equipment. Tip number 2, double track everything. Not necessarily your lead parts, though you can if you want, but definitely your rhythm tracks. Since the waveforms between the tracks won't be exactly the same, you will get a thicker and wider sound from double tracking. Some people prefer quad tracking, but I find this can start to sound muddy if you're not careful, and sometimes less is more. Make sure you actually play and record the same part twice, and don't just copy and paste your first take onto a new track, which won't give the same result. Lastly, make sure to pan your 2 tracks left and right. I typically do 45 for both left and right, but you can also pan all the way. This is really just a matter of personal preference, so do what you think sounds best. Tip number 3, cut the reverb. Here I'm specifically talking about rhythm guitars. A lot of amp sims, including Logic, will put some form of delay or reverb in your tone by default. Most of the time for rhythm guitars, this is not necessary and will only clutter up your mix. With Neural DSP, reverb is easy to remove, but with some other amp sims like the Logic stock amps, even just finding the reverb is not always the easiest task. First, check your sins and make sure if there are any output buses that you didn't add yourself that they are disabled. Most of the time you will find that they have an instance of Space Designer. Next, you will want to, of course, make sure that the reverb is disabled on your actual amp. And finally, open Smart Controls and you will usually find more reverb and delay hiding. Disable those and you should be good to go. Tip number 4, adjusting your IR or impulse response. You'll find that no matter what amp sim you're using, a lot of your tone and sound actually comes from the impulse response or cabinet section. Most plugins, including stock Logic plugins, will let you adjust the cabinet and microphone. Experiment with changing these out if you have the option and moving the mic around to get the result you want. I typically go for a brighter sounding tone, so I like to move the mic closer to the center of the cabinet speaker. If you have the option to, try comparing your guitar tone to the isolated guitar tracks from one of your favorite songs and see how close you can get just by adjusting the cabinet section and microphone. Also, if you've double tracked your guitars already, try to keep the tone sounding as similar as possible between the 2 tracks. I like to use the exact same tone for both, but if you decide you do want different tones, just be aware of any drastic volume or frequency differences. You can always put a level meter on each of the tracks to see how they compare with their RMS or perceived volume level. Before we get to the last tip, a quick word from our sponsor. It's me! If you are enjoying this video so far, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications. I'm trying to grow my channel right now, and this is the best way to support it currently. I have new production and vocal tutorials planned for the future, and I also have new music coming soon. It would mean the world to me if you could check it out. And if there are any other video tutorials you would like me to make, let me know in the comments.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
Finally, tip number 5, adjusting the EQ in the right places. The first thing I personally recommend is turning down the super low and super high frequencies all the way. They aren't very audible and will only clutter up your mix. Most Neural DSP plugins have a 9-band EQ that makes this very easy, but if you don't have that option, you can use another EQ plugin after your amp sim and adjust everything below around 65 Hz and above around 15 or 16 kHz. Another adjustment I almost always make is about a 6 decibel boost at 8 kHz. This will make your tone sound much brighter and like it's right in your ears. I found that I can actually get away with using less overdrive and distortion with an 8K boost because it lets the guitars cut through the mix better. Be careful not to boost this too much or it's going to start to sound harsh. Typically, later on in the mixing stage, I will also make other smaller adjustments to the guitars with the EQ. I might put a very slight and round boost in the lower mid-range, and maybe some very narrow cuts around 4 or 6K, because they can carry a harsher hissing sound.
You're done.
All right, thanks so much for watching. I really hope that you learned something in this video. And once again, if you enjoyed, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one.